Yeah, I'm ready. But yeah, I've been listening to you guys since you got started, and I've watched you kind of build the team. I've watched you, grow the team. I've watched what you've been doing for so many people for so long. I'm absolutely honored that you'd think about me for this.
Yeah, that's just amazing to me because I remember, as a matter of fact, I was texting the guys earlier and I was trying to remember when it was that you and I first connected. I was actually stalking you, I think, for a period of time. And I want to say it was around the time you were a captain. I want to say either you were at SECO first or you were over in 173rd. And I don't remember when it was. And I just started like from afar, people that were following you. I was stalking you through them. And then eventually we end up connecting on social media and that type of stuff. But I'm really honored that you followed us since day one and since the beginning. I mean, finding people who are the OG is really, really cool. Trust me.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it was probably the 173rd, because before that, when I was in the Rangers and before, like, none of us used social media. We all believed that it was a way that we were going to get tracked at some point for all the terrible things that we did. And but when I was getting ready to leave to go to Vicenza, somebody told me, they said, Matt, if you don't start like Facebook or Instagram, like, your whole family and all your friends are going to lose touch with you. You're going to go over to Vicenza for a couple of years and no one's going to know what you're up to, So I did it because of my family, because I wanted my mom and my dad and my brother and everybody, and I wanted to keep in touch with all of them and see what they were doing. And it just grew, because when I got to the 173rd, not even like a month later, well, it was that same month that Russia invaded Crimea. And so then we had to go into Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland for those months. It was 2014. And I remember General Hodges said, we got to make 30,000 soldiers seem like 300,000 over here. And so one of the things we did was we were telling everybody everything that we were doing through every platform we possibly could. And that's how it all got started.
Wow, I had no idea of that. I met somebody a few months back, and he said that he started following us like, I don't know what it was, 6 years ago, because we just now celebrated 9 years, but it was like 6 years ago, and he said it's when he got to the 173rd, his NCO said to all the people there, they're like, if you're not following Mentors for Military, get on it right now and follow Mentors for Mil. And I couldn't believe it that, like, that was going on at that time period. So the fact that you 173rd, I think you're right. I think it was around that time period. And we'll get down through the whole time period, of your whole career and stuff. Cause I want to go all the way back to the very beginning. What I thought was so cool, the Marine Corps has a term for it. I think it's called Mustang. The Army, I don't think we have a real name for it, but the fact that you went green to gold, but before you were all that, you came into the Army as a private. And to get where you are right now, Matt, that's like huge, man. Seriously.
I appreciate it.
You don't see very many enlisted guys go be a full bird.
No.
And I think you're being groomed for something much.
I don't know about that. Please. We'll have to cut this off if you guys keep going like that. I'm gonna lose connection. I appreciate it though very much.
No doubt. So you're originally from Massachusetts. So let's take everybody back to day one. But growing up there, I guess later on, you ended up moving on to New York, Syracuse. Is that right?
That's right. I grew up in Massachusetts, but then we moved to Syracuse. I did my high school years in Syracuse, New York, so we could be a little bit closer to my mom's side of the family, grandma and grandpa. And then I joined the Army when I was 17, when everybody else was getting ready to go to college. I didn't want to apply to any schools. I got a decent score on the SATs and I got good grades, but I just knew that wasn't the direction I wanted to go at that time.
Yeah. And so when you were in high school, you played sports?
I played everything. I did every sport you can think of. I was average in every sport you could think of, maybe slightly above average in a couple of them, but I wasn't big. When I joined the Army and when I was 17, I was about 5'9.5". I was about 145 pounds. I think I had a size 9 shoe. So I was the youngest kid in every class I was ever in. I wasn't big. I was small. I couldn't play football. I couldn't keep up with the people that were a year to a year and a half older than me. But then when I left for the Army, I was still about that same size. I was about average in everything.
What made you pick the Army out of all the branches? What was it that drew you?
I'm not sure why Army over the others. I never even considered the other branches. I don't know why. I had an uncle that was in the Army. I had a grandfather that was in the Army. But that wasn't the driving factor. I'm not 100% sure. It was just, I kind of got gravitated towards the recruiting office. I watched a few videos, the typical that everybody's heard, the Ranger in Action video, and I said I wanted to do that. It seemed about right. I did play Army, growing up as a kid. I loved being outside. I loved fishing. I loved playing every type of sport. So it made a lot of sense that that's how I would go spend a few years of my life and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I'm still
I don't know
doing
very many. But so when you went down there, you joined the Army. There was no such thing as an option 40 at that time frame when you came in.
They just didn't call it that, but there was RIP contracts. Like there was about 13 of us, I think, in basic training that had a RIP contract. We were all in the same platoon. We all knew we were going to go to RIP after basic training.
Yeah.
But you hear so many stories about people that are like, I watched this video, or I did this, I read a book about it. There was none of that in 1993. When I left, and I left in '94. There was no social media. There was Black Hawk Down had just happened, but there was no movie. There was no books. There was no web. I didn't know any of that stuff, and I didn't know anybody that was in the Rangers. And it's probably a good thing because I did not know what I was getting myself into.
Yeah, yeah. So you went right in. That was the path where it was airborne, then RIP. Then you get into selected into
Correct.
a battalion. Yeah. So back then it was mainly more physical training, like 3 weeks of pure hell.
Yeah. At the same time, you didn't know any different. Like I didn't know any different. It was rough in basic training, and then it was rough when you left basic training and you feel good about yourself for about like 2 or 3 hours. Then they put you on this bus and send you to like airborne school, and it's right back in line. You don't feel good about yourself anymore. You're being called a leg and everything until you graduate. And it was rough, and again for another few weeks. And again, I was only 18, so like I didn't understand like going out at night after you get done with the duty day. Like it was prep for the very next day. That's all you knew. And we did that for 3 weeks, and then you graduated from airborne school, got pinned right there on the drop zone. Drill Sergeant Hunter came down and pounded all of us that made it through, and you felt like good about yourself for another couple of hours. And then the bus went back to airborne school. We put our stuff in duffel bags, and then when everybody was celebrating, everybody was leaving. There was about 40 or 50 of us that went off to the left, and they said, get in formation. And that little black pickup truck pulled up, and Ranger was standing in the back, and he's like, put your bags in the back of the pickup truck. And you can imagine how many duffel bags fit in the back of a Ford Ranger pickup truck. Not a lot.
Yeah.
But then you get there, and you got your folder with all your paperwork, and they say, get behind the truck, get in formation, and don't fall out. And you started running up the hill to RIP, but you didn't know any different. You're doing what you're told. You're more afraid of what's going to happen if you do fall out than what. So you just don't fall out. Going up the hill.
Do you think that made it easier, not knowing?
I think it did mentally for somebody like me, because I remember when they would say certain things to us. They would say like, we're going to keep you outside until you freeze to death. And someone would be like, they're not really going to keep us outside until we freeze to death, because they don't like us. And I'm like, well, I'm not willing to take that chance. Like, I'm not going to do it. Like, I don't believe them. So I think the people that had a hard time, whether you're 22, 23, 24-year-olds that had done a few years in college, they didn't buy in right off the bat, and I didn't know any different. I was just doing what I was absolutely told every minute. Like they were the coach that I had always wanted, or the coach that I was maybe the most afraid of at times. So there was a combination of both. You don't want to let them down, and then there was people you were just afraid of.
Did they ever mention any time about Somalia while you were in RIP or anything like that? About the purpose and, what you're training for or anything like that?
Yeah, it started coming out like as soon as we got there, like because you start learning about Ranger history, and as soon as you get there, it's the first thing that they hand you is this big packet on like Ranger history, and you start, Darby, Merrill, Downing, Stringham, Taylor, Kernan, you start memorizing all of the regimental commanders and all the, what happened in October, what happened in this time, what were the dates for Just Cause and Urgent Fury. And then they started talking about what happened in Mogadishu. And when they started talking about it, it really kicked in when one of the sergeants, Chuck Pressburg was his name, and he said, hey, the people that are walking out of that door right now, all of them were in Mogadishu. Like, there's Jeff Struker. He was my squad leader. He was the guy, from the movie, driving the vehicles in and out of the city. And there was two other NCOs. I don't remember their name because they were not my squad leader or platoon sergeant. But they were also in Mogadishu. One of them had jumped into Panama. So, this is where I learned what the star meant on your wings, what it meant to wear a scroll on your right shoulder. We were learning right there in RIP from the classmates that I had, but then from some of the cadre that were there. But you didn't know, you didn't realize, like, this was somebody they're going to make a movie about here pretty soon. These are going to be like legends for the rest of your life. We were just doing what Staff Sergeant Struker told us to do, demonstrated for us to do, how to do it. And yes, I do think it made it easier mentally. It was do what they said. And if you do what they say, you're going to be successful. I remember he told us something like, when you get to the Ranger Battalion, they're going to do things to you and they're going to tell you to do things that you don't understand. And you don't understand why they're telling you to do it right now. Just do it. Do what they say, because someday you're going to realize why they're telling you to do it. It might not make sense to you right now, but it will someday. And he couldn't have been more right.
When did you find out that you were going to first? Was it one of those things that you volunteered, or was it the eeny, meeny, miny, mo type of method? What was the method that you got picked?
So when you say you don't understand the mind games that they might be playing with you, none of us thought we were going to get what we chose. We were all being told, like, you're not going to get what you chose. Be prepared to go to 3rd Battalion if you want to go to 1st. We didn't, like, they told if you were from the West Coast, you're going to the East Coast. If you're from the East Coast, you're going to go to 275. And you had to really work hard. I think they were just mentally preparing us for, you didn't know exactly what battalion you were going to go to. In the end, we all got exactly which battalion we had asked for. I think there was about 140-something people that started, and like 40-something of us ended up getting our black berets. So there was a small amount, and they divvied us up by 3, and, we all got to, we all got to go to each of the battalions that we asked for. But again, when you talk about the mindset that they were putting in us, this story, I've heard it now, either through the Legends of the 75th or somebody else so many times, and it was, there was this one run that we did out at Cole Range, and it was like, they called it like the Ruck Run or something like that, and it was cold, and we were out there, and they did it until everybody fell out. Now, we didn't know that at the time, but everybody had fallen out at some point, and I fell out at like, I don't know, the 2 or 3 mile mark. I fell back there, like sit on the side of the road. But when it was all over, I remember Jeff Struker, he walked me in the room, and I sat down, and he's like, okay, Ranger Leclair, you did a little, you did about average on the PT test. You did, okay in land nav. You did about good in this. You did pretty good on all these other things. But it says right here that you fell out of the 6 mile, like, ruck run at Cole Range. Is that true? And I was like, yes, Sergeant, I absolutely did. And he goes, okay, well, based on that, I think I'm going to recommend that you recycle and you do this again. Straight face. And he said, are you willing to take a recycle? And without a second, I said, absolutely. I'll take it. I don't got anywhere else to go. This is why I joined the Army. And he said, okay, well then congratulations, you're going to go to 1st Battalion. And off I go to, and that's how I found out I was going to 1st Battalion. But for a second there, I thought for sure. And that, like, right from the beginning, that was like the lesson of never give up. Don't, just keep going. You never know. And there's plenty other stories that
was
are
your
just
pucker
like that.
fecker just a little tight at that moment there, though, Matt?
For sure. I'm sure of it, and it just set me up for like later on in life when Corey Perkins told me, hey, when you get to Ranger School, there's going to be this moment where they're going to tell you, hey, the bus broke down, And the bad news is we got to walk all the way back to camp. And
Yeah.
how far is it? It's like 10 miles or something. Whoever wants to quit, go over there. Whoever wants to go, ruck up, let's go. And sure enough, the same thing happened in Ranger School. And off you go and you start walking away, and the people that decided they couldn't do it, they were over on the right, and you could go around the back of the berm and like, what's there? The buses.
How did your
so
Ranger
it's
school go? Were you one and done? Did you have to recycle it any
I
time?
recycled everything there is to recycle.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, I did the extended. I did the extended version. I was a private first class. I went to, but boy was I prepared mentally and physically. Don't give up. I wasn't prepared in terms of like understanding the Army. Like I didn't know how to do an op order. I didn't know how to do that. I was the typical PFC from a Ranger battalion that got to go. But I recycled mountains, so I had to do it twice. Then I recycled Florida because I got to go, but I was less than 50% overall, so I recycled Florida. There's a lot of stories that came with that, how that recycle came to be. But then I went home on a cycle break and came back, and then I graduated, there. So I was about 6 months. I graduated on my birthday.
Good God.
Yeah, in 2006. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that having so much exposure to failure early on made you the leader you are today?
Oh, without a doubt. At this point, when somebody's like, you can make a mistake and it would be catastrophic. Like I feel like I've made all the mistakes, or I've always been the person that made the mistake that everybody learned from. Never anything illegal, immoral, or unethical, but I was the one that maybe took a chance when somebody else wasn't willing to, or would be the first person to try something, and because I also think, Caitlin, because nobody expected me to be anything other than maybe average or slightly above average, that once you got that taste of being, a Ranger and you made it and then you get your EIB and you become a jump master and you're like, not a lot of people get those things and you see a little bit of success. It became like even more of a fire to keep going and to keep pushing, because to see the look on some of the faces of people that maybe didn't expect you to make it, and I'd be lying if I said that's still not the case today. That I love to see the look on some people's faces when they see it, or when they hear my name and they're like, Leclair, really? And I say, yep. Mm-hmm. Still here.
I love
Still
what you
doing
said
it.
about making or understanding or learning from the mistakes and everything. That you were the guy that was making the mistakes that others were learning from. I totally have learned more from the people have made I've watched that made mistakes, or of my own mistakes, than I have from those things that I did correctly. And as strange as that may sound, that's some of the worst leaders taught me the best thing about how to be a leader.
Sure.
Because you got a chance to see just how poorly that was.
Yeah, I think just like I've got a lot of mentors and a lot of coaches that were the phenomenal leaders, I've had a lot of leaders along the way that were not good, that did a lot of things that I said, and I've said this countless times. If I'm ever in a position to influence something like that, that will never happen when I'm around. Like that the way that soldiers get treated when they were younger, the hazing and stuff like that, and that will never happen while I'm around. But it sure as heck does. It absolutely does. And then, then when you see 3 or 4 soldiers with bloodshot eyes first thing in the morning, and you walk over to them, and you're a colonel or a lieutenant colonel and you're a captain or whatever, and you walk over to their team leader and you said, hey, not the right night to be doing that. And they go, what are you talking about, sir? And I was like, I know, you know what I'm talking about. Last night was not the time to be doing that. We got a big mission coming up. We got a big jump coming up. That was not the time. You could see it coming from a mile away.
I think from those good leaders, like what you're talking about, that mentoring, disappointing that individual was probably one of the worst things. I mean, because if you really, truly look up to that individual and you aspire to be them or whatever the case may be, man, it's sort of like a parent. If you let that parent down, that hurts. That hurts worse
Yeah,
than the belt.
there's nothing worse than getting like the dad talk from a platoon sergeant or a first sergeant or something like that, or a company commander, troop commander, or something like that. It is like, oh, it's one of those like, we didn't expect this from you type thing. Like, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go cry somewhere or something like that. You know what I mean?
I learned that from the first person that I ever looked up to like that was Corey Perkins. He was a staff sergeant. He was my weapons squad leader when I was a gunner, when I was growing up in the Rangers, and we looked at him like he was God. He had deployed to Panama. He did the jump. He was calm. He was cool. He was always the person that you didn't want to let down. And when he was one of those people that didn't talk all the time, but when he did, everybody listened. And we wanted to be like him. So, like you said, we didn't want to let him down. When that person believes in you and believes in you maybe before you believe in yourself and does something for you, it changes the way you look at leadership and for the rest of your life. And Corey Perkins, the story about him was we were getting ready to do a big live fire, and I was a machine gunner at the time, and our weapons squad leader, our platoon sergeant, had to go home. And so the platoon sergeant had to go home right before this live fire. It was like 24 hours out. He had to leave, emergency leave, and Corey Perkins is going to take over as the platoon sergeant. So I said, hey, which squad leader is going to take over as a weapons squad leader so I can get him schooled up and get him ready to run the support by fire? And he says to the platoon leader, he said, nope, we're not going to have somebody stand up. It's too late. Leclair's going to run the support by fire. And I was I was either a PFC or a machine gun or an E4. And when he said that, there was no letting him down. There was no way. I was going to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, and we were going to get that right and do it to perfection. And I remembered that, and I also said, that's the kind of leader I want to be when I'm in charge, is I want to trust people, and I want them to believe. I'm going to believe in people before they believe in themselves if they deserve it, and do that for people.
Yeah. When you have something like that happen too, you kind of feel like you can't fail at that point. You have this you have so much wind in your sails from someone just believing in you that I can understand the feeling that you had there. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's happened more times in my career as well. But when it happens at, Caitlin, back to your point, when it happens at a young age, it just becomes part of who you are for the rest of your life. And that's why I feel like when I often say that, growing up in the Ranger Regiment was the foundation of not just my military life, but my Army life and my life in general, is that the things that you learn at that pivotal moment in your life where you're deciding whether or not it's also where you're deciding if I'm going to do this long term or if I'm going to do this just for a few years. And the way that the Ranger Regiment made that foundation for my life, it's helped me be a better parent, I believe. It's helped me be a better friend, a better teammate, a better leader in every way, shape, or form because of those first few years.
Yeah. Okay.
That was so interesting that you were saying that you failed early in life and almost sort of was proud of it, because I didn't really experience failure to my mid 30s, and that pushed me so far back, especially professionally, just mentally. And I think it would be interesting had I got more, hits to the face early on, professionally, where it was absolute failure, absolute stop point, where I had to just go and not rely back on anything else.
Yeah. Now, there's a fine line between success and failure at a young age. I've also seen a lot of cases where somebody joined the Army either to be a Ranger and they didn't make it through RIP, or they joined to go to the X-ray program, and we've all heard it about buds with people that joined the Navy to go to be a Navy SEAL. And if they're not successful in that first thing that they really signed up for, that's it. They never get over it. Because sometimes when you don't get something like that at 18 or 19, they're not mature enough to get over that hump and to right that wrong, to right it for themselves. And so those people, they end up going off to their first unit, and let's just say it's the 82nd or the 101st or the 10th Mountain, and it's not the experience that they were looking for. They don't have the same NCOs that I was blessed to have. They don't have that same experience. They don't have people pushing them. They don't have people pushing them to Ranger School. They're not getting pushed to Jump Master School to get their EIB. Next thing you know, it's re-enlistment time, and they've been in 3 or 4 years, and they're like, this isn't what I had hoped. And yes, they had some failures, but they also never had the mentors to help them get over those failures. So I do think there's something to be said about young 18, 19, 20-year-olds to have some success early in their life and get a taste of some success.
Well, that's part of that Abrams Charter thing that, we also often bring up and stuff as well. I mean, you were blessed to have great NCOs, great officers that were leading you, that were pushing you in the right ways, right? To teach you the right ways of how to be a leader. And the whole idea is for you then to leave the regiment, to go out inside, the regular Army and conventional Army, and actually pass those same types of traits and qualities on to future non-commissioned officers or officers of the day. Unfortunately, though, regiment, fortunately or unfortunately, regiment is now, really heavily pushing to, we're not pushing, but their environment is different today, in which I think more people end up staying longer than what they used to back in the day. Most guys, I think, let's face it, a lot of guys washed out within 24 months. They ended up saying, hey, this isn't for me. This is like crazy. And they check out. Or they were being pushed out the door by their NCOs and officers. Whereas today you see guys who are veteran Rangers. I mean, they're like 15, 18 years inside multiple battalions inside a regiment and haven't left yet. So I think there's something to be said about folks like you, Matt, that, I mean, you did it because you went green to gold, but you still left and you ended up coming back at a different timeline. But by doing so, you were able to then pass on those traits and those qualities onto other individuals, so that people who weren't as fortunate, like you mentioned, get a chance to run across you as a leader and see what leadership is supposed to be like.
Yeah, I love Abrams Charter and everything that it was put in place to do. I feel like we are in a very similar boat right now in 2024. Probably more like 2023, probably like last year, where we got recruiting and retention challenges. We're starting to have a little bit of discipline, challenges across the Army. We don't have a big war. It's a really kind of guiding light for everybody to get behind right now. That was about last year. That felt a lot like the 90s when I joined.
Yeah.
So, the Ranger Regiment it continues to be that example for others to follow, right? And when you go out, the level of impact that you can have on a unit outside of the regiment it floored me. When I hit the 82nd Airborne as a second lieutenant, it absolutely floored me how much of an impact you could have because of the things that you learned growing up in the Ranger Regiment. When I showed up to the 82nd Airborne Division as a second lieutenant, we went off to Fallujah immediately, and half of my platoon had been to RIP and didn't make it. More than half. Wow. So that's where they're getting all these airborne, folks. 3 of the guys in my platoon were on the day of graduation. Right before graduation, they had went home for the weekend, or they went home on a pass, and they came back late and didn't get their black berets. And so those people ended up having, going to the 82nd Airborne Division and didn't pass RIP. Half my platoon. And I remember after a couple months of being there, some of the privates were like, "Hey, sir, how would you compare our platoon to a Ranger platoon?" And I said, I've put this platoon up against any platoon I've ever been a part of. At that point we had been, seasoned. We had seen enough over there. We were starting to come. We had come together as a team. We had really bonded, and we were really doing really well over there at that time.
Yeah, that damn victory drive. I mean, it eats up a lot of people, right?
I loved it. I loved my time in the 82nd, and I've had some friends that have served in the Rangers. And I said, man, you think that the Rangers are proud of being in the Ranger Regiment? You wait till you experience the 82nd, because the people are so proud of their heritage and the stories behind the 82nd and being proud. I mean, they have All American Week every year, and thousands of people come to Fort Liberty to be a part of All American Week. It's a special organization.
Yeah. So you ended up, let's kind of go through your career, because we talked a little bit about green to gold, but we've been skipping around a little bit. But I was, by the way, at Benning when you went through RIP and everything. I was at there at that same time frame, and I can remember the way the regiment was with the Black Beret time, with the Cold War era. It was a tough environment, high and tight. Long sleeves, never rolled them up, spit shine boots. I mean, they were sharp. There was no doubt about it. Great NCOs there inside that compound that I used to go over and talk with as well. And then, you know, for you end up spending about 5 years, like you mentioned. You go to Ranger School, you get Jump Master, the whole bit. What made you decide to go the officer route, though? Was it something that you saw that you wanted to achieve greater, or was it individuals that talked to you as a mentor? What was the switch that all of a sudden happened?
There's no one particular moment. There was it was a combination of a lot of things. You know, at that point, I met a couple people that were talking about Green to Gold. They had talked about this program. I knew that I wanted to get, now it's like I want to go to college at some point. I'd like to do it before I got too old. Maybe there's a way to get Uncle Sam to kind of pay for that. I had been successful, again, Ranger School, Joe Master School, my EIB. I didn't want to throw away everything that I had worked so hard to get. So I was like, what is out there that'll allow me to keep kind of doing what I've been doing, right? I had met Christy, so I had a girlfriend that you know, I was trying to decide what am I going to do? Am I going to ask her to marry me? Am I going to stay here? Am I going to ask her to marry me, come back to Syracuse with me? Like, there was a lot of decisions, you know, on my mind at that moment. And, you know, like typical, like when God gives you a sign, he's like, you know, he tells you what it is you're supposed to do. And, you know, Christy and I found out she was pregnant. We got married. I moved out of the barracks. We got a house, and I started Green to Gold all in about the same, you know, months. This was August, September. 1 year. I would not recommend that be like the path for people. But I said, Christy, if we can make it through this first year or two together, and get through this, like we're going to be set. Because she was in nursing school, I was going to be a second lieutenant. This was the direction we were going. We're going to be okay if we can make it through this. But if I could back up and actually answer your question, the question was why to become an officer.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily know I wanted to be an officer. I just wanted to continue to serve. I liked the Army. I liked what I was doing. And the Green to Gold just kind of answered the most amount of those questions. Although Lieutenant Colonel Votel, he was the battalion commander at the time, Joe Votel, and he, like, you know, I was thinking about Green to Gold. I was considering it, and so I went by Miss Sheila's desk. Miss Sheila is the secretary for the battalion commander at 1st Battalion, and I said, "Ma'am, I'm trying to figure out how to get this letter of recommendation so I can do this thing." And she said, "Well, let me, Britt, come in here." She walks me right into Colonel Votel's office, and she's like, "Sir, you need to talk to this sergeant. He's considering being an officer." And he like sits me down right there on the couch, and he says to me, he goes, "Why do you want to be an officer?" And I said, "Sir, I don't know if I do. I just know I like this Army thing, and I want to keep doing it." And what he said to me he goes, "Matt, let me ask you this." He goes, "Do you want to be the person who takes somebody else's orders and policies and makes them happen to perfection? Then you need to stay in the Army and be a sergeant major and be a first sergeant. But if you want to be, or do you want to be the person that writes the policies, makes the orders, and does the plans going forward?" And I said, "That's what I want to do, sir." He goes, "Then you need to go become an officer and go to college, and I'm going to help you. Go back to your room and start writing up your letter of recommendation." And he started coaching me from that day forward, and he has ever since.
Wow. Incredible. I mean, the fact that he, took the time to sit down and have that kind of mentoring session with a young sergeant who's evaluating his career is pretty incredible in itself. But, you know, some very wise words there that a lot of times, you know, because you were in the enlisted side, and especially as a non-commissioned officer, there's always the us-them approach. And there shouldn't be, really, because like you had mentioned, there are roles that everybody has, much like there are roles of enablers versus combat arms. All of those types of things come into play. And so in this case here, you know, he was trying to give really good advice on strategy versus tact, you know, or being the tactical side of it. So you chose a path that obviously has worked out well for you. And, you know, it was great advice at that time frame, I think, that you needed.
Yeah. But I never forgot, what it was like being an enlisted soldier and a sergeant and what I expected from the officers.
Sure.
And I've tried to be that officer that I wanted when I was a Ranger team leader. That's what I was expecting, and I had a lot of phenomenal people to look up to when I was growing up. There was Jasper Jeffers, J.P. McGee was my company commander, Art Kandarian was my company commander. And I could keep going on all the legends. That was John Cogbill was my platoon leader. All these people are multi-star generals right now, and they've been so successful. But these were the captains and lieutenants that I was looking up to, which is again why I said, if I become an officer, I will be an average at best officer as I go forward, because this is with the people that I was trying to be like, as I was growing up.
I think some of the best officers I've ever ran into, and I'm sure, Caitlin, you and Kyle would probably say some of the same, were those who were former enlisted, because you've kind of walked the walk. You were the individual that clearly understood, what an NCO is up against. And we have some really great individuals that choose not to go the officer route. They still have a college education. They may even have a master's degree or a doctorate degree, but they chose a different path. And so because of that, you don't fault them for that. You recognize their strengths, what they bring to the table. And I think that because of that, because you empower, because you trust, it makes your NCOs and your soldiers want to work for you that much harder as an officer, since you were there, you carried the load.
Yeah. And I think it's leveraging your strengths, right? It's like when you figure out where you would best fit the team, how you could best help the team, and whether it's to become an officer, what type of officer, if you do become an officer, what branch are you going to select?
Sure.
And I wanted to select the type of branch that I could make the biggest impact in, and I could help people on day one. And so I chose the infantry, because that was not I didn't think I was going to. I thought for sure I was going to choose aviation. I'm tired of being wet and cold. I'm not going to do this infantry thing anymore. And then after a year, I realized you have to be really smart and you have to get good grades, and your eyes got to be real good. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. But I was a computer science major, so then I was like, I'm going to be a commo. I'm going to be a 25 series. Like I'm going to be, I'm going to work on computers because that's the way of the future. And then I realized I don't like computer science anymore. Like I can't wait. And then I went to camp, and I remember between your junior year and your senior year, and you go around and you go to every one of these like branches, and they give you the branch pitch on why you should go to their branch. And then I went to each of these, and they were like, well, it kind of sucks while you're in the Army, but when you get out of the Army, you'll have all these good skills. And I was like, well, I want to stay in the Army. Like I want to be in the Army for a while. And they're like, well, everybody always yells at the SIGO, and everybody, it's hard. But so then I show up to the last day, the infantry station, and there's a bunch of Rangers standing there, and they're like, yeah, we're the infantry. We got enough people signing up. Here's a pencil. And I was like, all right, this is where I belong. Going back to I'm going back to the infantry. I belong with these guys. Like this is where I belong. And I never even considered doing something other than the infantry the rest of my life, and I'm still doing it.
Well, that was kind of your sweet spot, but you also ended up going into throughout your career and going to the Cav side, which I know is dear to me and Kyle, and serving with 25th ID. And so I think what's really good now is you see a lot more of the combat arms rotating within. And I think that's extremely important too, especially, Cav, infantry, armor, those kind of what I would call the three trifecta kind of core branch there.
Yeah.
But some would disagree. But at any rate, I feel like there's some really good stuff that's now going on within the military to groom officers and help them understand the different areas. Obviously, you do that as you go through the ranks. You end up going and getting your staff time versus your command time, and you work with SIG, you work with S3, S2, S1, and those types of things, and understand that. But you guys getting a chance to see one another in different combat arms fields as a commander, I think now you get an infantry officer that's leading a CAB unit. There's so much that you can learn from that infantry commander. So much that you can gain that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten, I don't think, from say an armor or even another branch or something like that. So I think on occasion sprinkling in those infantry officers into those opportunities and stuff. I think if the Army ever starts doing that more broadly, I don't know if that's something they're already doing. I haven't really followed that up with that too much.
They did it pretty heavy with the
Did they?
IBCT model.
Okay.
I mean, I had a lot of squadron commanders that were infantry officers.
Yeah. We were doing it more for a few years. It was if you were light infantry, you had to go mech, and if you were mech, you had to go light. We were doing that for a while. There was a few. I know my name was often referred to as, the person who got to be light infantry as a platoon leader, as a company commander, as a field grade. And then I went to the Cav squadron, and I remember someone saying, "We can't even send you to a mech unit because you've been nothing but light units your whole time, and now it's time to be a battalion commander, and we can't even put you up against a mech unit." I said, "What's the downside here?"
Exactly. I was going to say, and
yeah, I know. So I got put into a Cav squadron, and boy, did I love it. I absolutely loved it. And I went to the Cav leaders course as a lieutenant colonel, and that fundamentally changed the way I looked at targeting and how you went out to answer the commander's decision support matrix, and how you use things like PIRs and information requirements, and how you would go to specific places to look for certain indicators that would help you answer a question for your commander. And so then I came to be the Cav squadron commander, and I helped now General Williams. Kevin Williams was our brigade commander the first year, and Neil Mayo was the second year. And I would help them answer any question that was on their mind, and I would just get it from them. What are you worried about right now? What are you thinking about? Well, I'm worried about if I got to go north or if I'm going to have to go south, in the corridor, and I'll go help you answer those questions. What indicators are out there? What things are out there? Those become PIRs, and help kind of as the chief of reconnaissance. And then when General Gerard was the division commander, they were toying around with the division cavalry concept, and how would some unit be the cavalry, the reconnaissance organization for the division, as we were toying around with that. And it was the same way. Hey, sir, what decisions are you worried about right now? Like, what are you thinking about? And then we would turn those into PIRs, and I would go try to answer all his questions. I think as an infantryman, what made that different was, being in the Rangers for so long, like I knew what scouts were being expected to do, how you could move dismounted, how you could keep a low signature, how you could work off of comms windows, how you would work off of mission command, commander's intent, and maybe not talk to your commander for 24 to 36 hours. But when you came up on the net, you would answer those 3 or 4 key questions for your commander. And I was super comfortable if I didn't talk to people for 24 hours at a time. And I was super comfortable putting them in dismounted, into JRTC or into whatever form of a box that we had to. And I would give them my expectations up front and the decisions that our brigade commander was going to have to make, and then I would let them go, and I would go find them, and I would get close enough to talk to them. A lot of people would say things like, it's the lower unit's responsibility to talk back to their higher headquarters. If that's the case, your scouts are never going to get far out, because they're always going to be too worried about talking to you. And instead, I pushed them out so far, and then when I needed to talk to them, I had to find a way to get close enough to them to be able to talk to them in a comms window. And I trusted them to answer those questions.
Well, commander's intent. That's one of those things often today, even, Matt, on the outside, I use quite often with my leadership teams to help them understand the importance of me providing enough guidance and direction so that they can go off and feel empowered to be able to do what they've got to do. So, I think things like that and the things that you just mentioned are so critical, so key to being a leader in general, no matter whether you're in the military or out of it, whether you're enlisted or as an officer. Just understanding some of those basic leadership traits and skills, I think, are really important. That can take you with you a lifetime.
Well, you can't have true decentralized command or decentralized leadership without giving somebody their left and right limits, telling them how to report back, giving them a deliverable, whatever it is. It could be 12, 24, 36 hours, and then seeing if they're going to meet that deliverable. I mean, that's the basis of decentralized command.
Setting up a range card, understanding everything you just said there. You could use that same type of analogy or same type of thing out in the private sector. And Kyle, I know you've probably done it as well.
Yeah.
all day.
And I think it just, as you become older, and I think as you become more senior, the the way that you do that is it stays the same. Like you still got to explain to your people what the expanded purpose is and the overall purpose of our higher headquarters is. You still got to explain why these are the key tasks that you think that need to get done. Because a key task is something, right, that if somebody has to do it, it has to be done by whoever it might be in our organization, the information requirements, and then you have some form of an end state that you're working towards. So when they bump up against something that you didn't clearly identify ahead of time, they're like, I know the end state that we are working towards, the vision that they're working towards. He would want us to do this, and they can make that decision more or comfortably.
You've had some pretty amazing assignments. I mean, like after 82nd, which, by the way, I want to go back just for a second on the 82nd because we can cover just the rest of it here in a moment. But when you got out of ROTC and you went on to get your assignment and everything else, you got 82nd. But my understanding is they had you depart a little early because your unit was deploying, and you had like 7 days before you had to go off to combat because it was post 9/11. You were in the school and everything when 9/11 happened. So tell us a little bit about that. You didn't get to finish out your FTX, right?
Yeah. It's obvious that you listened to some of the other podcasts where I might have told that story.
It's actually a cool story.
It is, but Mike Albaugh is always beating me up. He's like, you tell the same 7 stories every time you get on to something.
I was going to talk about him in a second, so let's...
So it was right after 9/11, and so there was only 3 of us that had already been to Ranger School and Jump Master School. There was 3 of us. There was me, Nyberg, and Sandretto, and the 3 of us were in the school, and we were finishing up, and there was about a month left, and we had the big fuel problem coming up, and I remember them saying, like, they called us out of formation, and they said, Leclair, Sandretto, Nyberg, come here, and we say yes. And they said, you 3 of you are not going to go to the field with everybody else. You guys are going to start clearing today. Your units are deploying. 2 of us were going to the 82nd, and Nyberg was going to the 101st. He said, your battalions are scheduled to deploy right now, and you guys need to start clearing. And on the day of graduation, you're going to leave and go to your unit. And we said, yes, sir. And this was a time where, like, my whole life had just been that way. Like, I had always been on RF1. I had always been prepared. It was always, ready to go at a moment's notice. That was just the norm. So it seemed like, okay, I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna start clearing and start preparing. And who was the guest speaker at that was Colonel Votel. He was the regimental commander at the time. And he's like, Matt, wait, when are you leaving? And I said, sir, I'm leaving today with Christy and the boys. Here's my mom and dad, but we're leaving we're going to Fayetteville today. We're going to start driving. And that's exactly what we did, is we drove up there. I met my battalion commander, company commander, and sergeant major that night. It was like a Thursday night or a Friday night. And they said, you're going to deploy next Saturday and go get your CIF, get your stuff, situated. But more importantly, I was more worried about Christy and the boys, about what I was going to do with them, because we were signing a lease at a house there in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I knew nobody. There was nobody in Fayetteville that we knew. And Christy looked at me and she's like, if you're leaving in 7 days, like, I don't think I can stay here by myself with the boys. Like, I would rather be somewhere where we're closer to home, because my mom and dad and my sister lived in Fayetteville. My brother lived there. Her mom and dad, they lived in Savannah. Everybody lived in Savannah. And so I said, let's do it. And we got out of that lease. We didn't sign it. We took all of our household goods. Instead of getting delivered to that place, I put half of it in storage. And as the movers were putting it into the storage, I had a rider truck sitting there, and half of it went into storage, and then the things that she needed went into this truck. I drove it, followed her from Fayetteville down to Savannah. We put it in an apartment, same apartment complex that my mom and dad lived in, and then we got her settled in. And then 2 days later, like Monday morning, I drove back to Fayetteville, got my CIF, tied all my stuff down just the way that Jeff Struker taught me how to all those years before, and met my platoon on 2 days later, and we left on Saturday to go to Iraq.
Crazy, right? I knew Kyle would appreciate that story. Just like,
Yeah.
So when you talk back about the timeline and everything, when you were trying to get Christy settled and the whole thing before you go off the what was it, ROTC, and the whole bit, or right after you got married, and then this here, you've always been, like you said, in that kind of state of mind, of anything could happen at any time frame. How am I prepared? Do I have, do I understand how my bag's supposed to be packed, what I've got to do to take care of my family? How can I take care of the troops? Are we ready to go to do this mission? Those types of things. Obviously, like you said, those were embedded in you at a very early age of being an NCO. So now let's talk about somebody you name drop. Let's go ahead and talk about Mike. Brett Johnson. I mean, two guys that became regimental sergeant majors. So these are not like your, regular Ranger Joes or whatever, spent 5 years and, moved on and everything. These guys are legends in their own rights. Tell me about how you got to know these guys so well.
Yeah. Well, it's not just those two. Like when I was growing up in Charlie Company, 1st Ranger Battalion, during that time, in our platoon alone, between 2nd Platoon, 3rd Platoon, but in the whole company, I mean, the amount of sergeant majors that came out of that, Brett Johnson was a Gustav gunner I remember when he got there. Rick Merritt was our first sergeant at one point when he was the Charlie Company 1st sergeant. It just keeps like Brett Johnson was. I already said his name. Craig Bishop was the 2nd squad leader.
Yeah.
No, Mike didn't. I think Mike served in 275, 375 most of his time, but then Mike came and he was the 1st sergeant when I was a company commander. That's how I got to know Mike. He was the 1st sergeant already in Charlie Company when I took over the company. But being surrounded by these people, again, you talk about being blessed. Like, these people helped me as an officer. They helped coach me along. They helped show me the way. Brett Johnson was a platoon sergeant when I showed back up as an officer. Rick Merritt was he had sat on, 1st Sergeant Merritt had sat on my E5 board, and then I come back as a captain. And I remember when Rick Merritt was the RSM, and he saw me and he said, "You were a good team leader. We'll find out if you're going to be a good officer." And that was like his way of saying, what we need out of Captain Leclair is not what we needed out of Sergeant Leclair. Like, we don't need the same things. We need different things out of the officers around here. It also was that wake up call of nothing you had done before mattered. Like, what mattered is what you do for the organization now, going forward. So those people, have a special place in my heart. They helped me become the person that I am today.
Yeah. No, great stuff. And I love the advice that he actually gave you. It was hilarious because I think that a lot of people don't realize when they make that transition. I know that a buddy of mine, Kyle, Don Fox, he went from being an enlisted guy that became an officer. And for him, for so long, I think many of the officers also still wanted to talk with him like the NCO. Hey, help me out here. How should I handle this situation? The battalion commander did, or the brigade commander would even call him into his office and stuff. And in some ways, he still felt like he was still the enlisted guy in their mind. They didn't see him now as captain or major, Fox instead. At least that's the way I interpret the stories from him. So, I mean, I think that was great advice for you to receive, that, you've got to break it, but you also got to put this image out there that others are receiving, that you're no longer Sergeant Leclair as well.
Yeah, there was some people out there that would never look at me as Captain or Major Leclair. They always saw me. Yeah, some people, I think, always saw me as that young kid that was growing up in the Rangers. They never saw me mature. They never saw the things. They maybe used a brief interaction with me or a brief moment, like later on in my life, and certain circumstances where maybe the worst comes out of you, and they see that, and they can't see past it, going forward. It's just a reinforcing moment of, you got to work, twice as hard. You can't rely back on the things that got you through, back then. Yes, some of those foundational things like discipline and doing the right thing and, PT and in standards, those things carry they'll never go out of style. But you've always got to be learning. You've always got to learn something new. You've got to go back and look at the doctrine. You got to go back and look at it as a colonel now, and not think like, okay, I understood it when I was a sergeant. I understood it when I was a captain. You got to go back and relearn it. You got to look at it all over again now as the cog, out here. I've got to relook at the way we do things in this new this new modern way of warfare, and you can't just be like, oh, we're still going to push rocks and sticks and terrain model around. Like there can't be a better way of doing it. Yes, there can be a better way to do it. There is a better way to share information. There are better ways and new ways that folks are figuring out to get towards a good outcome faster.
Right. You're a student of leadership. You and I have texted and talked about some of the things in the past of, the way you, even on your podcast. So you can go ahead and do a little plug here, man, about the podcast. Teach Me How to Fish. It's a great podcast for those who are enlisted or officers that are looking for leadership, hearing other people's journey through that, their leadership and everything. But you bring up and talk about a number of different topics on your podcast. And with that, you have different leadership traits and stuff that you talk about, the stories that you to bring to the table. What is some of your favorite books that you've actually read about leadership that's given you a lot of assistance?
Yeah. I think the first time anytime you answer a question about a book, you got to take it who you're getting that question from. So when I get it from like a junior officer, or I get it from a young enlisted soldier, I give a different answer than I do if General Gerard asks me every time I see him, what are you reading right now? Like, it's a different answer, so I look back at like some of the books that I was reading when I first, Common Sense Training, The One Thing, Atomic Habits, like what were some of the things that I was reading, High Performance Habits, things that I was reading when I was a young major, and I was trying to figure out like where I'm going to go in my life. Because major was when captain and major was when I really started to say, what got you here won't get you there, right? Like the famous book, is like, if you're going to continue to serve, if you're going to continue to lead soldiers, or if you're not going to lead soldiers, if you're going to have to go do something outside the Army, they're going to expect you to have different skills, right? And that's when I started really becoming a book junkie and a leadership junkie, and that's when I did a master's degree. I did a master's of administration focused on strategic leadership, and I couldn't get enough when it came to leadership. And then I did a project on establishing my own managerial consulting firm in Savannah, Georgia, focused on helping people with leadership. Why did I do those things? Because my branch manager told me I was not going to be a battalion commander. Absolutely told me, flat out. He said, Matt, you are not going to be a battalion commander because you spent too many years in the Ranger Regiment and you got too many HQs. So it's mathematically impossible for you to be a battalion commander.
Interesting.
And I said, okay, then I want to go be a professor of military science. And you know what he said? If you go do that, you sure as heck ain't going to be a battalion commander. And I said, oh, if that's how this all ends, is that you don't get to do it because you serve and you're trying to make the best officers that are out there that are going to be future leaders in our Army. If that how it ends is you spend too much time in the Ranger Regiment, I'll take it. And that's what I wanted to go do, and so that's what I did. And I went and I poured myself into helping prepare the future officers of our country through ROTC. And then about a year and a half later, I got told you're going to be a battalion commander. And so when I got told I was going to be a battalion commander, thank God I had poured myself into, all the things I just said. And when people say, hey, you should do a master's degree because that's going to make you a battalion commander, that's not what it's going to make you. It's the person you become going through the process of getting a master's degree. It's reading all those books and the person that you become, study them, not being able to quote them, but being able to apply some of the things that you've read in those books at the precise moment where where the opportunity presents itself. They call that intuition, right? The ability to see something before it even happens. Or they say, why are you getting so lucky? Maybe it's because you keep putting yourself in position to get lucky. And then you had read and studied enough situations, right? The book Range, where you've seen enough things in a lot of different ways, and now you're able to apply it in a moment where it has to be. I think that's the secret sauce, Rob. It's not how many books you've read, but it's, are you able to take what you learned from some of those and apply it at the exact moment where it can have a great effect. You're not Johnny come lately who comes up and said, this is what you should have done, or you wrote a big paper like after the fact about what you should have done. I want to be the person that is out there out front making the decision, anticipating it, putting the wheels in motion for something to happen, and then somebody to say, I don't know how that happened. I don't know how we got so lucky. I don't know how we got such great results. I'd rather have that.
John C. Maxwell is a great writer for leadership because of what you just mentioned. There are probably too many people who came from the education side of the house and never really had true leadership. But what they did, like you said, of applying it, but instead what they did is they taught leadership, and then they write these books. And so we need more people like you, Matt, thinking about writing a book and putting it out there where people can see what applied leadership actually looks like. I mean, you think about like Deming and some of these other people, of different philosophies or principles that were out there. They were all educators. Yeah. They weren't people who lived and walked the walk.
Yeah. The other part of that is when what I'm thinking about right now, as you said that, Rob, is like when you want to know a book, like the best book to read, I always ask, what are you trying to learn right now? Like, what are you trying to become an expert in? And you get a lot of different answers. So if you get a soldier or an officer or somebody outside the Army and they're like, I'm just really trying to figure out, how to be more effective in my day-to-day life. Then you bring up all those books that you've read, the high performance habits, the one thing, the atomic habits, right? These books that, you go get, do you have a journal? What type of journal do you use? Do you use the best self journal, where it kind of coaches you through? Like, these are the things that I use and I've been using for years, right? If they say, I'm getting ready to take battalion command, all right? Have you read the first 90 days? Never heard of it. Okay, that's the first book you should read, as you get ready to take a significant leadership position, the first 90 days. And then that should spring you into, I've been in my unit now for 90 to 120 days. We're figuring out how to do a bunch of things, all the things that the Army's got us doing on a daily basis, but we've got 3 or 4 big projects that we're working on. The 4 disciplines of execution. That's your book. That's the one where you're going to take those, you're going to make some progress on a key things, some key priorities, but you're going to do all the things that the Army absolutely also tells you have to do every single day. And not just he calls it the whirlwind, or good to great. I'm trying to get my organization. It's pretty good right now, but I want to sustain it. Read anything from Jim Collins. Now is the time for you to read, Good to Great, or Built by, Great by Choice, and any of those books that identifies the things that make units special. Why does the Ranger Regiment year after year after year continue to excel? Well, it starts with they bring in the best people, and then they ruthlessly bring them through their assessments program. They don't just take anybody off the street, right? Any organization any organization that's going to take anybody off the street to make their numbers is going to struggle in a few years. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Sounds real familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. When it's funny you mentioned a few of those books that I actually enjoy reading, and for me in the private sector, for a lot of people when they're trying to figure out how to get things done, a book like Execution by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. I don't know if you've ever read that book. Is one of my favorite ones to actually start with. And then there's a book that if you like Good to Great, CEO Next Door is another one that's really good, because they use, like Good to Great, they use data-driven or analytics in order to evaluate these corporations and what actually separated them from others. The CEO Next Door did the exact same thing in evaluating why did these individuals become successful CEOs and corporations while others didn't? What were the traits and things like that came along with it? Caitlin, I know I'm right in your wheelhouse right now, but this is like, understanding those types of traits and things that people have at a certain point of their life and what they're trying to experience next, or what they feel they need as an additional tool in their toolbox, is so critical, like you said, to just growth overall.
Yeah, it can't be the same book for everybody. It has to be a different book, different lessons for different people at a different point in their life. Go ahead, Kyle. You said it. You had something.
Oh, I was going to say, I was kind of perusing your Instagram a couple weeks ago, and you were reading stuff like Stoicism. Like, are you reading the Daily Stoic, or are you trying to? Is that your journal?
Day. I think I'm on my 4th year of reading the Daily Stoic. So now when I turn the page, it's interesting to see the note that I wrote myself from last year or the year before, and how often it's the same note that I need to hear that day.
Yeah, and I was seeing that. I'm going to ask you: are the notes still like? Are you getting a new copy? Or are you like checking on yourself while? Like, redoing the
every day it starts off with the Daily Stoic. That's the first one. And then the Maxwell Daily Reader is the second one that has to do with leadership. I go those two, right? And I make a note, or I use the same note from last year. Then I take a blank piece of paper, and I say to myself, if I could have anything done in the next 10 minutes, like, what would it be? And I write down the notes. It's the things that are just bothering me that are still in my head. It might be something basic. It also might be something really challenging. And it's like, I have to come up with this enterprise plan for JPMRC. We have to get that out, and I have to finish my 90-day assessment. I have to hand that to the CG by November 1st. I write those things down, and if I write it down 2 or 3 days in a row, I know I've got to get that done. It's my forcing function. And then I immediately read something that I'm trying to learn. And so if I'm trying to put together this enterprise plan, trying to do a 90-day assessment, I skimmed through my notes on the first 90 days. I did that this morning, today. That's what I did this morning. I read through it, and I do it until that spark goes off in my head. Then I go straight to the daily journal. I look in my journal. I get my 3 tasks, the things I got to do for the day. And then my purpose. I write down my times, everything that I'm going to do throughout the day. Then I usually do a stand-up with my team at that point, where we talk about everybody's one thing, the one thing that they got to get done today. Then we go over the what does the schedule look like today, so we can support each other. What's the schedule look like for the rest of the week, so we can support each other going forward. What big decisions do we have coming up for the rest of the week? Not just me, but them. So I can support them and they can support me. And I tell them what's on my mind in case I don't talk to them for the rest of the day, or maybe even a couple days. Again, we're talking mission command, commander's intent every single day. And then the last thing we talk about is get it off your chest. What's bothering you right now? And we kind of get it all off our chest. We did that this morning. And I might not see some of those because I'm going to fly out to Alaska tonight. Me and Christy are going to fly to Alaska tonight on the 9 o'clock flight, and we're going to land there at 5 a.m. And I'm going to visit 2nd Battalion in Alaska for the next couple days. Going to go to the cold weather orientation course, freeze my butt off.
You'll be fine.
There.
Nice.
That's going to be a new experience.
Get your Arctic
You'll
tab.
probably see a picture of that.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yep, you'll see a picture of that for sure.
Nice.
Probably me going into the water, and then we'll do the. And then we're going to do the final planning conference for the big exercise that we're going to run here in January for second Brigade of the 11th Airborne Division. One of my best friends, Jimmy Howell, is the brigade commander, and I'm going to be we're going to run his brigade through their CTC up there in January.
So at the COG level, you're doing 25-meter, 100-meter, 500-meter targets with your people every day. Essentially,
almost every day.
Or when you're in office or in that is.
Yep.
I think that's something that a lot of senior leaders just don't understand the benefit. They're always driven out forward, way out front. I got to look right here. But sometimes the biggest wins can be like right there in your face. If you just let people know, like, this is important to me. Yeah. Let me know what's important to you right now. We can get these wins. And that may create a winning streak for the day, the week, the month. I think that's a huge tool, and any leader's tool belt is to identify those things. That's awesome. Yeah,
like the biggest thing that I've done in this last week, I went to the Combat Training Center Commanders Conference, the CTC Commanders Conference at Fort Leavenworth for about 48 hours. All right, so you had all JRTC, NTC, JMRC, and JPMRC. We were all there with everybody that's there from the G3 of the Army, everybody that has to do with training. Everybody was there. We talked about the combat training centers, the way future. I gave everybody an update on how we're doing at JPMRC, what's going special, right? And then I followed that on and I went to HRC to lock in all the people that we were bringing to JPMRC. That's the tactical level. Like if I absolutely got into the weeds on which majors and lieutenant colonels we are bringing to be part of JPMRC here in the future. You talked about, Rob, getting the right people on the bus. If you just take anybody that comes to you, that's a recipe for average results. That is not the recipe for exceptional results and building an organization, which is what we're doing right now, building the Army's 4th CTC. And it takes special people. That was the first thing General Flynn told me in an airport in Chicago when I found out I was taking over, as he said, go find the right people, because you're not going to get a ton of them. There's only so many people in the Army right now, and the Army's got way more requirements than they do people to fill all these requirements. But make sure that the people that you do get are the right ones that are going to be a part of this mission, that are going to be fired up to help you go do it. And that's what I've been invested more time in, finding the right people and picking the right people and investing in those people than anything else.
Sounds like in your career, though, you needed a good HRC to find a good branch manager to help you out in your direction.
That's right. I just talked to all the branch managers this week.
Yeah, well, that's great, because I think, it's important to select the right people there. They're the individuals that's going to be guiding these young officers throughout their career to make the right career choices to help them go do whatever they want to do in their future, career. So,
yep.
I mean, the advice that guy gave you was really, really bad. Hopefully he's moved on to something.
I echoed that to all the people that I met with.
Good. Yeah.
I said, if the first thing that's coming out of your mouth when you advise an officer is how to get an MQ, that is the wrong direction to be advising people.
Yeah.
I said, you need to advise people to go in the direction of where they're going to go to a unit or a location or place they're going to wake up at 4 a.m. and they don't need an alarm clock. They are so fired up to go do what they want to do that day in that unit, because that's what our soldiers deserve. They deserve a leader that is fired up to be there. We are doing a disservice to our soldiers if we send an officer or an NCO to a location or a unit that they don't want to be a part of, because they're going to show up there and the soldiers are going to see it. The soldiers are going to feel it, because the soldiers want to be there in some cases, right? But if they don't want to be there and their leader doesn't want to be there either, that's a perfect recipe for problems, right? And so we got to do our best. I believe we need to do our best to be putting people in positions where they will thrive, where their talents are going to be most useful, and they are going to be fired up every single day, because you can't make that shit up, that magic up, if people are getting forced into going to locations in places that they don't want to go.
I think it's really interesting that I'm hearing from you, Matt, that you are touching on 3 things, that you really rely on forecasting and compartmentalization, but also just educating yourself and continue educating yourself. And I think that is such an easy technical model for anybody to follow that is probably following behind you. And we love predictability when we have leadership.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Caitlin.
Some of the things you mentioned, what you do, and I'm going to go back and listen to this, because I think you've even covered it on your podcast on occasion, of the steps that you take with your team or with yourself and then with your team. Some of the things that I do, Matt, I don't know if you apply these things, but in the same way or something different, and maybe it's different within the private sector, but even now it's sort of like, what are the hot topics we need to solve right now as leaders that we need to come together on in order to overcome that challenge, whatever it may be that's in front of us. And so you may have a number of them that may step forward and bring something to the table that either we can help with and assist with from a coaching, mentoring standpoint, or that we can help them solve as a team member in order to make sure we overcome that. And then we want to make sure that we celebrate any new things that have happened throughout the past week that we need to touch on because we may have done a lot of great things and we're moving so fast and hard charging that we're not recognizing there's some good that we left behind back there that we need to bring forward and recognize as a team. And then we talk about what's coming up for the coming week that we need to make sure that we focus on. So I don't know that we celebrate enough, and that's why I wanted to come back to. I don't know that we celebrate enough of the good as we're going through the process. And I think that's important as a leader to make sure that you're calling that out and bringing that forward, because there's a lot of good that happens, a lot of things that never gets highlighted in a young private or a young sergeant, a young officer is not, the patting on the back doesn't always happen. And so when it's rewarded at a top level and it's recognized and then it's driven down, I think it carries a lot of importance.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is like, what drives people, right? And that was the ultimate reason I started the podcast, Teach Me to Fish, was I wanted to help leaders better understand what's driving people, period. Then you could say, okay, what's driving them to serve? Why are they serving in the first place? Why are they coming into the Army? Why do they want to stay with the Army? Because ultimately it was also to help the Army better understand, this time of recruiting and retention and how to get it and to figure out some of those things. And that's why I started doing it, because I wanted people to hear from the actual people that are out there listening. It's not just Matt Leclair telling you this is what people are thinking. Listen to them. They will tell you what they're thinking. They'll tell you what's driving them, and they'll tell you what's pushing them away in some cases. And I couldn't agree more that sometimes it just takes a tiny little simple attaboy. You did a good job. I noticed what you did the other day. Really good job out there. You see him on the corner, at the exercise. Good job. Give him a nod. Give him a wink, something like that. Like those things go a long way. Than somebody who's all they do is bring up the things that you could have done a little bit better. There's always some things we could have done a little bit better. But that culture of 1% better every day, a little bit better than I was yesterday, that becomes a culture thing, and not you pointing out all the things that I did wrong.
When you're sitting there talking to a young soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, whatever the case may be, a young individual that's trying to navigate their course, is there a thought that comes into mind looking at your own past, the mistakes that you made, the things that you did right, all those types of things? Is there something that comes to mind that you usually or you could pass on as advice to them, maybe even now?
Yeah. One thing I do that's common to everybody is that I believe you should be doing whatever it is that fires you up, that makes you excited to do whatever it is you're going to have to do that day. Anytime you get put in a job or a position where you're saying too many days in a row where it's like, this is going to help you later on in your life. It sucks right now, but it's going to help you later on. I think you're someone's going to catch you not having fun, and someone's going to catch you in a bad attitude. You want to be caught in a good attitude. You want to be caught positive, and you want to be caught doing things that fire you up, because then that's the way people are going to be like, hey, I want that person on my team. But if you're always in a position or a job that you don't enjoy, they're going to say, I don't want that person on my team. Look at them, they're always down. They're not having fun. Or they're going to say, I don't ever want to do the job that person's doing. Look at how miserable they always are, when they're doing it. So I think that's what's common for the officers as they get a little bit more senior. Or for the NCOs that matter too, is never self-select yourself out of it. Don't ever say, like, I'm not capable of doing that job, or I'm not capable of being in that unit, or I'm not good enough to be able to be the commander of that type of unit or this unit. Don't self-select yourself out. Make somebody else tell you that you weren't what they wanted or what needed to be, because you might be exactly what that organization needed at that time, the type of leader that organization needed. And if you're, again, doing the things that fire you up, being in the positions that you feel your strengths are being exposed and your weaknesses are being covered by somebody else, you're going to get hired to do that same type of job by somebody else. And I think that's why I'm still around, because every time somebody says you could go do this job and it'll get you this, or you can go and do something that you want to go do, I've always chosen what I want to do in an organization that I want to be a part of, in an organization that values who I am, the skills that I bring, and the things that I bring to the table. If you're looking for somebody who's a great writer who's going to like cross his T's and dot his I's, like I'm not your guy. Like that's not who you need. You know, if you want somebody to sit in a cubicle and just pound out papers and one-pagers, I'm not your guy. Like and no one has, thankfully, no one has hired me to do those things. Instead, they hire me to be the person that's out there figuring out what's driving people and getting those teams and building small teams and getting them fired up about a mission and a challenge and going out there and getting some quick wins and some early wins and some sustainable systems that, you know, and then it's time to go move on to the next thing that is right in line with what you've been doing for years. And I feel like I'm in the same boat now, just a continuation of what I've been doing for years.
Then I'm going to take you to the next level. One day we're all going to transition, because it's happened to everybody on this podcast, minus you. So what are you doing now to maybe prepare for that opportunity? What do you think is missing still from Matt Leclair's portfolio that you want to work on before you do make that decision?
Yeah, so, you know, if you could see me, if you're not like looking at a video right now, if you're just listening audio, but like in my left hand is like the things that you would do when you wake up in the morning. If money wasn't an issue, you didn't have to worry about how much you were getting paid. You know, nobody was telling you what to do. You could do anything that you wanted to do in this day. That's in your left hand. And then your right extreme is like, how are you going to pay the bills? Like, how are you going to pay the bills and make enough money, you know, to do whatever it is that you want to do for the rest of your life? You know, you can't just like hang out on the beach all day and, you know, you've got to do something, right? The goal is to find something, bring those hands closer and closer together. And that's what I'm trying to do even while I'm in. That's why I'm recording this with you. That's why I'm still recording Teach Me to Fish podcasts. You know, even right after we just did an exercise. I had Don Castello the day after the exercise was over. Tell us what you learned. Tell us what you're hoping to get out of it. What do you want to do going into the future? And then share it with people. So instead of writing a paper, that's not my style. I'm not writing a paper. I'm helping General George, but through his, you know, professionalizing the force and, you know, and in growing our profession through a different means, through a different venue. And this is one of those venues where you share what you learned with people. And that's what I want to share with people. Keep going forward. And hopefully when someone decides like, hey, Matt, you're not what we need or want anymore in the Army, and there's somebody outside that makes me an offer that I can't refuse, or somebody says, I want you to do exactly what it is you're doing right now for our organization. Managing talent, understanding what drives people, help us pick the right people, help us train the people that we do have to do the things that they need to do, and be a part of a team. That's the one thing I do know, is that when I do something, you know, here in the future, I will not be doing it alone. I won't be doing it by myself. I'll be doing it as part of a team, and a team that still values Matt Leclair for the things that he brings to the table and the things that I love doing.
Well, there's no doubt that you're going to be successful in whatever it is that you choose to do, because one of the things that you're echoing here, or that you're demonstrating, is that you know how to build high-performing teams. You know how to inspire people, how to treat them, how to get motivate them, or get more value out of them, whatever that may be. And that still applies no matter what it is. I mean, I feel like you can be whatever you want to be, and then when you move on, you apply those same principles, it's going to be effective. And I've seen it happen more and more. I can definitely see a future for you, Matt, whichever direction you end up going, whether that's in the military or in the private sector, because you just carry those types of traits with you. It's seen by others. You know, definitely.
Yeah, well, they're going to have to kill me to make me leave the Army, because, you know, I think they stopped paying me a few years ago, and I'm still around, and they're like, what are you still doing here? You know, why have you not given up yet? Because now more than ever, I love what I do. I love the people I'm doing it with. I love the mission. I love what we're doing it for. I got a son in the Army. I got a daughter at West Point. Like, I'm absolutely invested in making sure that our Army is as strong as it can be going forward for them, and to be a part of it. I love what I'm doing, and I love the opportunities that the Army, more importantly, the people that are in the Army, keep giving me going forward.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you're doing a podcast. I think a lot of people have come out and asked, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. Should I consider it? The whole bit. There's a lot of work, as you know, that goes into doing that, between scheduling the guest, actually having the conversations, doing the post editing, and putting it all up there. Caitlin had the same thing in the past as well, so she totally understands what I'm saying. So you're committed to it, and I appreciate that you're committed to it, because what you're putting out in terms of a quality product is what's going to resonate with a lot of people. There's a lot of stuff that I've always wanted to ask you. Yeah, no, I mean that, because there's a lot of stuff I've always wanted to ask you, of comments that you've made. I'll be driving down the road and I'll listen to it, and you'll make a comment and I'll be like, damn, we could do a whole episode on just that point right there. And some of it's even some of the things that you've admitted that you've done in the past that was a mistake, or that you were like, oh, I think time's passed now. I can go ahead and admit this thing, or say this thing, or whatever.
Plenty of those.
Yeah, and in those moments, I'm thinking, oh my God, there's a whole episode just around that aspect of what you're focusing on right now. So I think it's really good that you're putting out quality product. You're bringing on quality guests. But I enjoy. You could probably sit, honestly, Matt, in front of a microphone, and I'd listen to you. It's just that good.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Well, that one of what you just said is one of the things that I do the most, is that people provide me and they say, "Hey, I'd like to hear a story about raising kids, and how do you make high performing athletes. I got a son that's a golf pro. I got a daughter that's playing volleyball at West Point, even though she's 5'3". I got another daughter, Ryan Evans. She's probably going to play in college as well, and so." You listen to episode, I think it's number 14, Scott Brown. He was my best friend from high school. He's now the pitching coach for Vanderbilt. And he talked about managing the 24-hour clock, and how you help your kids, how you help kids become those kind of athletes, and the discipline that it takes going forward. So a lot of those episodes were for a reason. One, it was somebody that I knew that had a skill that I wanted to learn, or I wanted that they had shared with me some point over the years, and I wanted to share with as many people as I could. So those episodes were, a lot of times, the title of it says it alone. Is that's the goal of that episode, was to teach somebody, teach them how to fish so that they can feed their family for the rest of their life.
Great stuff. Matt, I really appreciate you coming on, man, taking time out of your busy schedule. It's only been 4 years we've probably been planning for you to do this. We had to do it remote because we just can't ever seem to find the time to a connection between you coming stateside, or when you were down in Florida and your son was going through basic, we were trying to do it at that time frame. It never worked out. It just seems to be both of our lives are too busy for us to put it together. So this is something we haven't done actually in quite some time frame, is doing it from a remote perspective. It's a little different dynamic. You have a bit of a delay on times and stuff like that. I know you do it often, sometimes in person and then remote as well. So you know what I'm talking about. But the fact that you took the time to come here, share your journey, your story, and drop some words of wisdom, I really appreciate it. We all do.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Well, I believe my wife reminds me of this all the time, because I say it. It's we make time for the things that are important in our life, the things that we value, we make time for, and we make time to do them right. So I've been preparing for this. I've been preparing, to talk to you guys. I hope that something I said is a little bit, valuable. I look forward to doing it again, in the future, because and I look forward to the other episodes that I'll do on Teach Me to Fish, based on some of the things that you guys want to hear. So I'm all ears. Let me know, and I'll go find the experts, the people that I know, the people that are here with me. And I have to do it remote most of the time because I'm in Hawaii. So I'm traveling a lot now. I'm either in Alaska, western of the national date line, or I'm going to be here in Hawaii. So you got to make do with what you got, and I'm not waiting until I get back on the mainland to do a lot of these things. So I'm going to keep going forward.
We'll never know. We might come over there and surprise you one day, Matt. Bring the gear and sit out on Oahu on Waikiki Beach and tape an episode.
Yeah, either here or in the tiki bar in my back patio.
Hey, I saw that tiki bar. Actually, it looks pretty good.
It's on Google Maps, so you can look it up.
Is it really?
It's back there. I put it on there. Yeah, so you can find it, and I would be disappointed if you guys found your way to Oahu and didn't hit me up. It's not that far a drive to come link up with you guys.
No, most definitely. Yeah,
Thanks,
likewise,
guys.
brother. And if whenever you guys are stateside again and stuff, let's try to make it happen. If you're especially around here in the Atlanta area,
sure.
let's try to hook up. Yeah.
I love seeing the pictures. I love seeing the videos that you go, and I look forward to shaking you guys' hands in person.
Likewise.